Welcome to Vivaflician, the channel where reality TV's untold truths are revealed layer by layer. Tonight's story is not just about love. It's about sacrifice, betrayal, and a choice that cost everything. Hello everyone, don't miss out. Watch the full video till the end. For years, fans of 90 Day Fiancé believed they knew the real story of Jenny Slatin and Sumit Singh, a cross-cultural romance that survived age gaps, secrets, and public judgment. But what cameras never fully captured was the silent war happening behind closed doors, a war inside a home, a war between a wife and a mother, a war that forced a man to choose between the woman he loved and the family that raised him. False accusations, a mother's ultimatum, and a decision so extreme that it ended their life in India forever. Tonight, we tell the story of how Jenny Slatin and Sumit Singh lost everything they owned, walked away from 90 Day Fiancé, and disappeared from the life the world knew, chasing peace in a land far away. This is not gossip. This is not rumor. This is a story of love pushed to the edge. Stay with us because what you're about to hear changes everything. The conflict began with a single accusation, one that would ignite chaos within the Singh household. Jen Slatin, the American wife who had fought tirelessly to be accepted by Sumit's family, suddenly found herself accused of something she had never done. Sumit's mother claimed that Jenny had misbehaved and even assaulted her in Sumit's absence. The allegation was shocking, not only because it was false, but because it struck at the very heart of Jenny's struggle for acceptance. For years, she had endured criticism, skepticism, and rejection from Sum's family. Now she was being painted as violent and disrespectful. Jenny was devastated. She had always tried to show kindness and patience even when faced with hostility. To be accused of assaulting her mother-in-law was not only humiliating, but deeply painful. She knew the accusation was meant to drive a wedge between her and Sumit to force him into choosing family over love. Sumit, caught in the middle, was torn apart. He knew Jenny's character, knew she would never raise her hand against his mother. Yet the weight of his mother's words pressed heavily on him. In Indian culture, a mother's voice carries immense authority, and to defy her is seen as betrayal. The accusation spread quickly among relatives and neighbors, fueling gossip and intensifying the feud. Jenny felt isolated, her reputation tarnished and her marriage under siege. For Sumit, the pressure was unbearable. He loved Jenny, but the accusation threatened to destroy the fragile balance he had tried to maintain between his wife and his family. This false claim was more than just a lie. It was the spark that ignited the firestorm. And as the days passed, the tension grew, setting the stage for the ultimatum that would change everything. The false accusation had already shaken Jenny Slatin to her core. But the true devastation came when Sumit Singh's mother delivered her harshest words, in front of relatives, neighbors, and family friends. She looked her son in the eye and declared, "Sumit Singh, if you don't divorce your wife, Jenny Slatin, you are no longer my son. I can't accept you as my child anymore." The ultimatum was brutal, cutting deeper than any accusation. For Sumit, it was as if the ground beneath him had collapsed. His mother's voice carried the weight of tradition, culture, and authority. In Indian families, a mother's acceptance is often seen as sacred, and to lose it is to lose one's identity. Jenny stood frozen, her heart pounding. She had endured years of rejection. But this was different. This was not just disapproval. It was exile. She was being cast as the villain, the outsider who had stolen a son from his mother. The pain in her eyes was undeniable, yet she refused to break. Jenny had fought too hard for her love to let it destroyed by lies. Sumit's father remained silent, his expression heavy with disappointment. Relatives whispered among themselves, some siding with the mother, others quietly sympathizing with Jenny. The atmosphere was suffocating, the tension unbearable. For Sumit, the ultimatum was a nightmare. He loved his mother deeply, but he loved Jenny, too. To choose one meant losing the other. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "You are no longer my son." The thought of being disowned was devastating. Yet, the idea of abandoning Jenny was unthinkable. The ultimatum spread quickly beyond the family walls. Neighbors gossiped, community members judged, and soon the feud became public knowledge. Fans of 90 Day Fiancé who followed Jenny and Sumit's journey were stunned as reports of the ultimatum surfaced online. The couple who had fought so hard to prove their love now faced the most impossible choice. Jenny tried to comfort Sumit, reminding him that their love had survived countless obstacles. But the ultimatum had planted a seed of despair. Could their marriage withstand the weight of family rejection? Could Sumit live with the pain of being disowned? The ultimatum marked the breaking point. It was no longer just a feud. It was a war between love and loyalty, tradition and freedom. And for Jenny and Sumit, the path forward would demand a sacrifice greater than either had ever imagined. The ultimatum from his mother echoed endlessly in Sumit Singh's mind that if you don't divorce Jenny, you are no longer my son. Those words cut deeper than any wound, leaving him torn between the two forces that had defined his life, his family and his love. For days, Sumit wandered in silence, unable to find peace. He replayed every moment of his journey with Jenny, the battles they had fought to be together, the sacrifices they had made, the love that had carried them through cultural barriers. Yet now all of it seemed fragile, threatened by the harsh demand of his mother. Jenny watched helplessly as Sumit unraveled. She knew the pain he carried, the guilt of defying his family, the fear of losing his mother's acceptance, and the weight of being caught between two worlds. She tried to reassure him, reminding him that their love had survived countless storms. But Sumit's devastation was too heavy. He felt trapped as though no choice could lead to peace. At night, he lay awake, haunted by the thought of being disowned. In Indian culture, family ties are sacred, and to be cast out is to lose not only identity, but community. Yet, the idea of abandoning Jenny was unbearable. She was not just his wife. She was his partner, his confidant, the woman who had stood by him when no one else would. Friends and relatives offered little comfort. Some urged him to obey his mother, insisting that family must always come first. Others quietly sympathized, acknowledging the cruelty of the ultimatum, but unwilling to challenge tradition. Sumit felt isolated, his heart torn in two. Jenny, though strong, carried her own pain. She knew she was being blamed unfairly, accused of things she had never done. But more than that, she feared losing Sumit to the pressure of his family. She had crossed oceans for him, built a life in India, and endured rejection at every to lace him now would be devastating. Jenny Slaton and Sumit Singh didn't just fight for love, they fought for peace, and the price of that peace was everything. This story starts right after the cameras stopped rolling, right after the confessionals, right after the "we made it" moment fans thought they saw. Because what the audience never truly witnessed was the slow, daily pressure inside that house, the kind that doesn't explode in one big scene. It suffocates you in silence until you can't breathe. For years, Jenny believed if she stayed calm, stayed respectful, stayed patient, the walls would eventually soften. She believed love could outlast culture, age, gossip, even humiliation. And for a long time, she was right. They did outlast it. But then came the allegation that changed the entire game, the accusation that turned tension into war and made their home feel like enemy territory. It began like so many family conflicts begin in real life, not with shouting, but with a claim that couldn't be taken back. Sumit's mother said Jenny had misbehaved. Then she escalated it, saying Jenny had assaulted her while Sumit wasn't there. That word, assault, wasn't just an insult. In a neighborhood and family system where reputation is oxygen, it was a grenade. If people believed it, Jenny wouldn't just be disliked, she'd be seen as dangerous, disrespectful, and unfit. A foreign woman who came in and brought shame. Jenny's shock wasn't only about the lie. It was about what the lie was designed to do. She understood immediately what this was really about. It wasn't about a single moment. It was about control. It was about forcing Sumit into a corner, so tight he'd have to choose. Jenny had spent years proving she wasn't a threat. Years trying to be gentle even when she was being tested. She cooked. She tried to learn. She tried to adapt. She tried to keep her voice low and her face calm even when she was hurt. And still, she was being painted as the villain. Not because of something she did, but because of what she represented, a woman who took a son. Sumit, meanwhile, was ripped apart in a way outsiders rarely understand. He knew Jenny. He knew her heart. He knew she wasn't violent. He knew she wasn't the kind of person who would put hands on anyone. But he also knew something else, something heavier. In many Indian families, a mother's word is treated like truth until proven otherwise, and even then, proving otherwise doesn't fix the damage. A mother's tears can become a weapon without her even lifting a finger. And when the accusation moved through relatives and neighbors, it grew teeth. People talked. People judged. People chose sides without evidence. Some didn't even care if it was true because it was useful. And Jenny felt that shift immediately. She wasn't just unwelcome anymore. She was the problem. Every look felt like a verdict. Every whisper felt like a sentence. Imagine waking up every morning in a place you sacrificed everything for and realizing you're now being treated like a threat inside your own marriage. Jenny's confidence cracked, not because she stopped loving Sumit, but because she started realizing love alone couldn't protect them from a family willing to rewrite reality. The house became tense in that way that makes your stomach tight all day. Doors closing a little too hard. Conversations stopping when you enter a room. Meals eaten separately. Long stretches of silence that feel louder than screaming. Jenny tried to talk to Sumit about it, but Sumit was trapped in survival mode. He wasn't just dealing with conflict, he was dealing with identity. Because in his world, family approval isn't nice to have. It's life structure. It's belonging. It's honor. It's community. And suddenly he was being told you can have your wife, or you can have your mother, but you cannot have both. That's not a choice. That's emotional blackmail dressed as tradition. And then the accusation wasn't enough. So the next step came, the ultimatum. It didn't come quietly. It came in front of people. That's important. Because when a parent makes an ultimatum privately, there's still room for nuance, for repair, for we'll talk later. But when it's done in front of relatives and neighbors, it becomes a public execution of loyalty. Sumit's mother looked at him and said the words that every son in that culture fears more than almost anything. If you don't divorce Jenny, you are no longer my son. Not I'm upset. Not I need time. Not I can't accept this. She went straight for the identity cut. You're not my son anymore. And when that happens, it doesn't only hurt emotionally. It threatens your entire place in the world. Jenny stood there listening, and you could almost feel her heart doing that sinking drop because she knew what those words meant for Sumit. She also knew what those words meant for her. She was being cast as the reason a family broke. She was being labeled as the outsider who made a son betray his mother. That story, that narrative, is powerful in conservative communities because it gives everyone a clean villain. It makes the mother the victim, the son the confused child, and the wife the evil force. It's simple, dramatic, and unfair. Jenny wanted to scream that it wasn't true. She wanted to defend herself. But she also knew that anything she said could be twisted. If she raised her voice, they'd say, see, she's disrespectful. If she cried, they'd say she's manipulating him. If she stayed calm, they'd say she has no shame. In those moments, you realize you're not being judged for your actions. You're being judged for your existence. Sumit's father stayed quiet, and that silence was its own kind of sentence. Because sometimes silence is not neutrality. Sometimes it's agreement without the courage to say it out loud. Relatives murmured. Neighbors absorbed the drama like entertainment. And for Sumit, it was like watching his life split into two. On one side was his mother, the woman who raised him, whose approval was tied to everything he'd been taught about duty. On the other side was Jenny, the woman he chose, the woman who crossed the world, took the hate, and still stayed. He loved both, but now he was being told love isn't enough. Choose loyalty. Choose blood. Choose tradition. And if you don't, you lose your mother. That ultimatum didn't just pressure him, it tortured him. Because even if he chose Jenny, he would carry the guilt like a shadow. And if he chose his mother, he would destroy the person who stood by him when nobody else did. That's why you saw him unravel. That's why he went quiet. That's why he looked tired in ways sleep couldn't fix. Because he wasn't only stressed, he was grieving a life where his love and his family could coexist. And Jenny watched him break in slow motion. This is the part viewers don't always understand. People online can be cruel. They'll say just choose your wife like it's a switch. But for someone raised inside a strict family system, being disowned isn't like being grounded. It's losing your roots. It's losing the people who define your place. It's being treated like you're dead while you're still breathing. And Sumit knew that if he didn't obey, his mother might follow through. Not just with words, but with total exile. No visits, no blessings, no family events, no belonging. And in some cases, that exile spreads, relatives cut you off too. You become a cautionary tale. Jenny tried to comfort him. She told him their love had survived worse. She reminded him they fought so hard to get married, and they did it. They got through the lies, the secret marriage, the backlash, the endless judgment. She believed that if they just held on a little longer, things would calm down again. But the truth was, this wasn't calming down, it was escalating. Because once an ultimatum is spoken publicly, it demands a result. If Sumit's mother backed down, she would lose power and face. And power and face are everything in these family dynamics. So she doubled down. The coldness increased. The hostility sharpened. Jenny's daily life became a maze of stress. She couldn't relax. She couldn't feel safe. She didn't know what rumor would be launched next. She didn't know what story would be told behind her back. And worst of all, she felt her marriage being squeezed by forces neither of them could fully control. Then something changed in Jenny, not her love, but her endurance. Because there's a moment when a person realizes, I can't keep living like this. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you finally admit the environment is damaging you. Jenny had given India years. She had given Sumit her reputation, her comfort, her security, her family back home, her stability. She had traded certainty for love, and she did it willingly. But nobody signs up to be emotionally attacked forever. She started to see the pattern clearly. Every time things got better, it was temporary, and every time they got worse, it was because someone needed control. That's when the idea of leaving entered her mind, not as revenge, not as drama, but as a survival plan. One night, after another day of tension, another day of feeling watched and blamed, Jenny finally said what she had been afraid to say out loud. Maybe we should leave. Not leave the house for a weekend. Leave the entire situation. Leave the country. Leave the battlefield. Sumit didn't respond quickly because the thought hit him like a wave. Leave India? Leave his parents? Leave the world he knows? For him, leaving wasn't just relocation. It was severing a cord tied to his identity. He imagined the consequences immediately. Family saying he abandoned them. Neighbors saying he ran away. His mother telling everyone he chose a foreign woman over his blood. The shame narratives would be endless. But then he looked at Jenny and he saw the cost of staying written on her face. The anxiety, the fatigue, the sadness that she tried to hide so she wouldn't burden him. He saw that she was slowly being destroyed, not by India itself, but by the constant hostility surrounding their relationship. And he also saw himself in the mirror of that pain. He wasn't okay either. He was living in a permanent tug-of-war, a daily conflict that turned love into stress. Days passed with that idea hanging between them. They didn't announce it. They didn't make a big plan right away. They sat with it. They tried to imagine a life somewhere else. A life where nobody could barge in with accusations. A life where neighbors wouldn't treat their marriage like community gossip. A life where Sumit wouldn't wake up every day waiting for the next family blow. A life where Jenny could breathe. But as they considered leaving, reality hit them hard. Leaving isn't romantic when you don't have unlimited money. Leaving means visas, paperwork, travel costs, finding a place to live, starting over. And they weren't young. Starting over at their stage of life is terrifying. Jenny had left America once already and built a life in India around Sumit doing it again. In the opposite direction or to an entirely new country would be an enormous risk. And then there was the show, the public identity they had built, the fans, the critics, the constant attention. Because once you're reality TV famous, your life stops being fully private. People watch your moves. People comment on your decisions. And the more the family drama became known, the more the pressure grew. Not only family pressure, but public pressure. People taking sides. People blaming Jenny. People mocking Sumit. And in the middle of that noise, Jenny and Sumit were trying to make a serious life decision. One evening, after receiving yet another message from someone connected to his family, something inside Sumit cracked, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet realization. He understood that there was no winning here. There was only choosing what kind of pain they could live with. If they stayed, the pain would be constant, daily, endless, and it would slowly poison their marriage until love felt like suffering. If they left, the pain would be sharp and immediate: family rejection, guilt, loss. But it might finally allow them to live as a couple without war. And that's when Sumit made the most difficult decision of his life. Not a decision to divorce, not a decision to obey, a decision to protect his marriage by removing it from the battlefield. He told Jenny, "I'm not leaving you." And in that sentence was everything: love, fear, grief, courage. Jenny cried, not because she won, but because she finally felt chosen in a way that wasn't half-hearted. Not chosen with hesitation, chosen with sacrifice. But the choice wasn't the end, it was the beginning of consequences. Because once you decide to leave a family system like that, you become the villain in their story. In their story, you didn't escape abuse, you abandoned your parents. You didn't choose peace, you chose a woman over family. And Jenny knew what was coming next. The guilt tactics, the emotional threats, the public shaming, the "how could you do this to your mother" speeches. They weren't just leaving a location. They were stepping out of a narrative that others controlled. And that's why, when they finally started preparing, they did it quietly. No big farewell, no announcement, no dramatic goodbye scene. Because they knew if they made it public too early, it could be sabotaged. More pressure, more conflict, more manipulation. They began focusing on the practical steps: documents, money, logistics. Where can we go? How do we survive? How do we start again? And every step forward felt like both relief and heartbreak. Relief because they could see a door opening. Heartbreak because that door required leaving behind a life they tried so hard to build. Jenny had memories in India, real ones, not just TV moments. She had daily routines, favorite places, friendships, small comforts. Sumit had his entire history there. But history becomes heavy when it's weaponized against you. And that's what was happening. Love became something they had to defend every day. And eventually you get tired of defending your right to exist. Their plan wasn't about running away from responsibility. It was about saving what was left of their mental health and their marriage. Because here's the truth people don't like to admit. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave a toxic environment, even if it means losing people you love. Sumit loved his parents. Jenny didn't want to be the reason he lost them. But the ultimatum forced the issue. The mother made it a cliff. Jump or lose your sonhood. And when someone gives you that kind of ultimatum, they're not asking for compromise, they're demanding ownership. So the couple prepared for a new chapter, a chapter where they might finally be just a couple, not a constant controversy. And that's where the morning they chose to leave did not feel dramatic. There were no cameras, no background music, no emotional speeches echoing through the house. Just quiet movement, quiet breathing, and the heavy understanding that once they stepped out, nothing would ever be the same again. Jenny woke before sunrise, not because she had slept well, but because sleep had become impossible in those final days. Every thought circled the same reality. Today they would begin the process of leaving behind the life they had fought so hard to build in India. The home that once symbolized victory now felt like a place filled with tension and silent hostility. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room. So many memories lived in those walls. Moments of laughter, late-night conversations, shared dreams about growing old together in a place they thought would eventually accept them. Instead, the room had become a reminder of constant pressure. Each corner seemed to hold echoes of arguments, accusations, and emotional exhaustion. Sumit stood by the window, staring out at a neighborhood that had been his entire world for decades. Every street held a memory from childhood. Every corner had a story tied to family, to festivals, to a life rooted deeply in tradition. Leaving wasn't just moving away. It felt like cutting a piece of himself off. He had always imagined building a life with Jenny there, proving to everyone that their love could exist peacefully within his culture. But the reality had turned into something else entirely. Instead of acceptance, there had been resistance. Instead of peace, there had been conflict. And now, instead of building a future there, they were preparing to walk away from it completely. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. Words felt unnecessary. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was filled with shared understanding. Eventually, Jenny broke it gently. "Are you sure?" she asked softly, not because she doubted him, but because she needed to give him one last chance to change his mind. Leaving meant losing contact with his parents, maybe forever. It meant stepping into an uncertain future where nothing was guaranteed, except that they would have each other. Sumit turned from the window and looked at her, his expression tired but steady. "If we stay, we lose ourselves," he said quietly. "If we leave, at least we still have us." That sentence settled everything. It wasn't about running away from problems anymore. It was about choosing a life where their relationship could exist without constant attack. They began packing what little they planned to take, not because they owned nothing, but because they couldn't carry everything. Most of their belongings would remain behind. Furniture, decorations, items collected over years. Each object represented time, an effort invested into a life that no longer felt safe. Jenny paused several times while packing. A photo frame here, a small kitchen item there, ordinary objects that suddenly carried emotional weight. She realized they weren't just leaving a country. They were leaving the physical evidence of their journey together. The early struggles, the small victories, the routines that once made them feel settled. All of it would stay behind. Sumit moved through the house quietly, collecting documents and essentials. His mind kept drifting back to his parents. He wondered if they knew how final this decision was. He wondered if part of them believed he would eventually give in and divorce Jenny. Maybe they thought the pressure would work, that he would choose family over marriage like many sons in similar situations had done before. But he had reached a point where giving in felt like losing himself entirely. He loved his parents, but he couldn't sacrifice his marriage to maintain their approval. That realization had taken years to fully form. It wasn't sudden rebellion. It was gradual understanding. Love shouldn't require the destruction of your own happiness. By late afternoon, the essentials were packed. Not everything, just enough to begin again somewhere else. The rest of their life in India would remain frozen in place, like a chapter left unfinished. They didn't announce their departure widely. There were no long goodbyes with extended family, no dramatic confrontations. They understood that making a scene would only invite more conflict. Instead, they chose a quiet exit, one that protected what little peace they still had. As they stepped outside, Jenny took one last look at the home behind them. It didn't feel like defeat. It felt like release mixed with grief. She had come to India with hope, with determination to build a life rooted in love. That dream had changed shape over time, reshaped by reality and resistance. Now the dream was simpler, not acceptance from everyone, just a place where they could live without constant emotional warfare. Sumit locked the door slowly. The simple action carried enormous symbolism. It marked the end of a long, painful chapter. For a moment he stood there, key in hand, remembering everything that had happened inside those walls. The arguments, the reconciliations, the moments of joy that somehow survived among the chaos. Then he turned away, because sometimes moving forward requires physically turning your back on what once defined you. Their journey away from India wasn't loud. No public announcement explained every detail. Fans who followed their story noticed the changes gradually. Fewer updates, less visibility. Rumors started circulating. Some people speculated that they had separated. Others believed they were taking a break from public life. Very few understood the full emotional cost behind their disappearance. For Jenny and Sumit, the first days after leaving felt surreal. Relief came in small waves. The absence of daily tension felt strange at first. They weren't used to waking up without conflict hanging in the air. They weren't used to making decisions without considering how family reactions might escalate. Even simple things like sharing a meal or taking a walk felt different, lighter, but the relief was accompanied by grief. Sumit carried the pain of distance from his parents deeply. Even when relationships are strained, separation doesn't erase love. It complicates it. He missed the idea of what his family could have been. He missed the possibility of peaceful coexistence that never fully materialized. Jenny noticed his quiet moments, the times he seemed lost in thought. She understood that choosing her had cost him more than anyone outside the relationship could see. She never treated it lightly. She knew their new beginning came with emotional scars that would take time to heal. As weeks turned into months, they began building routines in their new environment. Small habits that created a sense of normalcy. Grocery shopping without fear of judgment. Cooking meals together without tension. Conversations that didn't revolve around conflict. It wasn't perfect. Starting over rarely is. But it was peaceful in a way their life in India had stopped being. The public eventually noticed their absence from the spotlight. Questions appeared online. Had they quit the show? Were they facing new drama? Why had they gone so quiet? Speculation filled the gap left by their silence. Some stories were exaggerated, others completely inaccurate. But Jenny and Sumit chose not to correct every rumor. They had spent years living under constant public scrutiny. Now, they wanted something different. Privacy. Space to exist without commentary. Their love story had always been intense, filled with obstacles that most couples never face. Cultural expectations, family pressure, distance, public judgment. They had survived all of it. But survival often requires change. Sometimes it requires leaving behind everything familiar to protect what matters most. Their decision to step away from India wasn't about giving up. It was about choosing a version of life where love could exist without constant attack. They didn't disappear because they failed. They stepped back because they needed peace more than attention. And while the world continues to speculate about where they are and what comes next,